Welcome to the Service Game, where serve starts the story. I'm your host, IVJ, and in today's episode, we'll continue talking about the Indian Wells tournament, which is the first tournament in our Golden Swing, which includes the Indian Wells and the Miami Open, and both of those tournaments are played on hard courts in the United States. So, yeah. I think let's just get right into today's episode, sort of following from last week's episode. So last week we kind of ended off with the first week of Indian Wells, but this week sort of wrapped up Indian Wells, and today, actually, the Sunday is when, like the Sunday I'm recording this, is when the finals of both the women's and the men's singles tournament will happen. So definitely by the time my episode comes out, you guys will know the result for that. But yeah, I feel like this week we got some pretty entertaining matchups. So let's get right into our first segment, the toss. Welcome to the toss. So I think I want to start off with a news that's not necessarily happening on the court, but off the court. So the tennis tour, ATP, which is the men's tour, and Saudi Arabia is reshaping the tennis tour. There's actually this excellent piece of recording that I found on The Athletic. If you guys want to go check it out, it's reported by Matt Furterman and Charlie Eccleshare, and it kind of goes into depth about what I'm going to talk about. It's an excellent piece of tennis reporting, so if you guys want to go check that out, it's linked in my show notes. But basically, the gist of it is the SURJ, which is the sports arm of Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, will be buying tournaments, and the goal is to create longer off-season with the focus on a new Saudi Arabia event, which will be in 1,000, the Masters event, starting in 2028. And ATP, along with Saudi Arabia, they want to reacquire the licenses for several tournaments in South America, including the Argentina Open, a 250 event held in Buenos Aires, and Mexican Open, a 500 event held in Acapulco, which these actually just happened about a month ago before the Middle East swing. So both events, as I said before, are played in February, and that's when the ATP and the SURJ wants to stage the new ATP Masters 1000 event. And the desire is they want to attract top players in the world. So instead of playing these smaller, sort of scattered events, they want all of them to play in the Saudi Arabia 1000 event. However, I do want to mention that ATP's desire to reacquire the license doesn't mean like these tournaments will not sort of exist anymore. It just means that these tournaments will be leased to the same operators, which might mean that, so right now they're kind of controlled by different people, but under the same people's control by the ATP, they might be relegated to different times in the tennis calendar. But the problem with this is the tennis calendar is already so packed that if it gets moved to another point of the calendar, the participation of top athletes will definitely decrease in these tournaments. So that's sort of the gist of it. It's a really complicated and sort of like abstract thing currently. So if you want to get a better idea, please go read the article. So in my opinion, I feel like this is a two-edged sword because the strength of this, like something I feel like I will be appreciating, is we do really need to shorten the tennis season. I feel like everyone has been saying this, but this is genuinely like such a big concern because players, they're playing for such a long time and the tennis season is so packed that we're seeing a lot of players getting injured, stuff like that. And it's a good thing that sort of the tournaments, well, the Saudi Arabia sports governed body and the ATP are trying to solve this problem. However, on the other side, the weakness, or sort of just something that I don't necessarily appreciate from this, is the South American tennis will decimate. Like, already, I feel like they have been not getting as much like incredible players as the other European events at this time. But it's just really sad because we've gotten some pretty, like, for example, João Fonseca, the Brazilian player, he's from he's from South America, and I feel like with these tournaments sort of being put on a back burner, we're just prioritizing Saudi Arabia, which obviously we're gonna get, the ATP is gonna get a lot of money from a new like ATP 1000 event, but it's just, we have to question, is it always necessary to prioritize money over sort of continuing the tradition and the passion of tennis in South America? So yeah, but that's the big news that happened, and now we'll take a little break and we'll come back to talk about the hit, which talks about the actual tennis that took place in Indian Wells. Welcome to the hit. So let's start off with the men's side. I want to talk about Arthur Fils versus Felix Auger-Aliassime, with Arthur Fils defeating FAA with a score of 6-3, 7-6, and 11-9 in the tiebreak. So I think this kind of just shows how Arthur Fils really improved a lot since his comeback journey, which, to be honest, was just a month ago, which really doesn't seem like it because I feel like he sort of didn't have a lot of the setbacks that a lot of common like players who were just coming back from injuries would have had. So this really showed his growth because throughout this entire match, Fils was just constantly targeting Felix's backhand. And I mean, okay, Felix has an incredible forehand, but like I feel like the game plan was super just evident here. And in the end, FAA's backhand did break down, especially in the last point of this entire match. And I think this is just a representation of a well-rounded player against one with a strong, clear weapon, that if one is like the well-rounded one is able to avoid the really strong weapon, they have a really great chance of beating the other one. And it's just like a really interesting sort of matchup because they played in Montpellier and FAA actually beat Fils back then, but now I feel like even just with like 2 weeks, we're not like a month of just being on the tour, Fils improved a lot. And yeah, however, after this, he did play a back-to-back match against Zverev, which was for sure difficult just because he came back the day after, so he did lose that. But I think at his fullest potential, Fils does have the sort of potential. Fils does have the talent to challenge Zverev for sure. And also I want to mention that Fils did not have let his concentration like sort of okay, he lost his concentration a little in the second set tiebreak. He was down 0-5. FAA played great, but honestly, Fils was just sort of losing his concentration, and that happened a lot prior to his injury. But it did not let that stop him from winning the tiebreak. He was down 0-5, and he just sort of locked in and was like, okay, I'm going to try to focus point by point now. And he did manage to win this tiebreak, which I think is pretty impressive coming from a player who just took a really long break. Like, he's somehow able to perform better and just have better concentration than what he had before his injury. So yeah. Okay. The second match on the men's side I want to talk about is Novak Djokovic versus Jack Draper. So Draper won with a score of 4-6, 6-4, and 7-6, 7-5 in a tiebreak. Okay, this was a match of the year contender for sure. Such a good match. If you guys want to, please go watch the highlights. Like, it's genuinely such a good match. And also, Djokovic was playing good. Like, you can tell from his body language that he likes how he's playing and he's not, like, exhausted all the time. And I think just both of them will come out really happy with the result of this match because, Okay, there was this one point, I'm pretty sure if you follow tennis, you've seen it on your feed, but Djokovic managed to win that point. That was, I think, one of the points that will be added to his highlight package after he retired. However, he did say afterwards that even though he won that point, he felt that it cost him like a game or like several points afterwards, which yeah, because he put in so much effort just to win that point, but I just feel like he should be happy with his performance because he's constantly like still like playing at such a high level, and I think now he really chases matches like these because he's able to come out with sort of just feeling like he accomplished something at such an old age in tennis, and yeah, it's just pretty impressive to see. And Draper, I mean, on his end, just a great comeback performance. I thought coming in that Draper was not going to win this. Obviously, he has the ability to beat Djokovic. He's also the defending champion, but I just felt that it was a little bit too early in his comeback, but he proved me wrong. And even though he lost Medvedev, who was in ridiculous shape, who is in ridiculous form right now, I'll talk about Medvedev later, but yeah, it was still such a great performance, and I think really his serve has improved too after his comeback. Okay, now I want to talk about the two semifinals. So the first one is Sinner versus Zverev 6-2, 6-3. So I think coming in, a lot of people were saying how because of how hot Indian Wells is, it's going to be kind of hard because Sinner often struggle in extreme heat. But Sinner just won extremely quickly, and I think Zverev's returning and baselining just wasn't enough to really threaten Sinner's service games at all. And yeah, like whenever Zverev came close to a break, Sinner just spammed like two aces or three aces in a row, and Zverev really couldn't do that. Like, he really couldn't do that in his service games, which I think was the key difference. And Zverev really just don't have an edge when competing against a player like Sinner. So, yeah, that was that. It was pretty straightforward. But the other match, on the other hand, was Daniel Medvedev, who beat Carlos Alcaraz, handing Carlos his first loss this entire season with a score of 6-3 and 7-6, 7-3 in the tiebreak. It's the best I've ever seen Medvedev play in years, and as I mentioned before, it ended Alcaraz's streak of never losing a match this season. And I think Medvedev played like it was 2021 again, and the best thing was I feel like he wasn't bothered by Carlos's ridiculous shots. Like his shots were just whatever Carlos do just because he's so talented, or even the crowd, because I feel like the past 2 years we've just seen Medvedev being extremely sort of easily influenced by external circumstances. Like he'll complain about the ball, he'll complain about the crowd, but even if he was down a break in the second set, he was just calm and it looked like he was on a mission to win. And there was his backhand rally with Alcaraz, I think, is really what showed him being like a better player yesterday, like during this match. He was just constantly rallying with Carlos and he was being extremely patient. He was waiting for Carlos. To be honest, Alcaraz played great. Like, he didn't make a lot of mistakes, but I think Medvedev was just playing so good, and he's just playing, I don't know. I think he really does have a chance against Sinner, especially if, okay, to be honest, Sinner hasn't had that much like playing time in his legs compared to Medvedev, but I think if Medvedev plays like this, he will definitely have a chance against Sinner today. So by the time my episode comes out, you guys will know who won that matchup, but definitely, yeah, I think it'll be a great match. Okay, we'll move on to the WTA. There were also some pretty interesting matches. I want to start off with Mirra Andreeva against Ekaterina Siniakova. So Ekaterina Siniakova won with a score of 4-6, 7-6, 7-5 in a tiebreak, and 6-3. So I think this was a messy and scrappy match, but I kind of just want to focus on Andreeva and what it means for her. So she had a meltdown after she lost. After the second set tiebreak, she destroyed her racket. And when she walked out, she told the crowd, like, F you all. And Siniakova was in tears. It was just like this entire thing. And I think the thing with Andreeva is I don't know if her breakdown is just because she's 18, but also I don't know if this is something that has to do with her partnership with Coach Martinez, like Coachino Martinez. I mean, I really like their partnership, and I don't think that what I'm saying is they should end their partnership, but I think maybe something needs to change because last season I sort of contributed these meltdowns to like fatigue because it happened more towards the end, but these meltdowns are getting more often and more intense. So I think also part of it is definitely due to the pressure she's facing because of her age and her talent. She's already so much ahead of the curve. However, I feel like because there's new players that are coming up that's sort of around her same age, such as Iva Jovic and Victoria Mboko, she's feeling the pressure. And also, I think she was, particularly in this match, she was a little bit frustrated because she thought she was going to be able to win this easily. But Siniakova really made Andreeva extremely uncomfortable. There was a missed drive volley in the second set. That was an easy put-away shot. And the match point was in net court. I think just because Siniakova is such a talented doubles player, she has a lot of tools in her toolkit, such as like different slices, different drop shots, and her volley skills are just great. And I think that really made Andreeva uncomfortable. But yeah, that's that. And then I want to talk about Sabalenka versus Mboko. So Sabalenka won with a score of 7-6, 7-0 in the tiebreak and 6-4. So they played in Australia a few months ago during Australian Open, and I think during that I kind of just talked about how like you can really tell Sabalenka was so much more better, and that's why she's the world number one. Like she was able to completely dominate Mboko, and Mboko in the second set of that match did I think challenge Sabalenka a little, but I think this one is so much more closer in terms of Mboko's like gap between Sabalenka. But I think one of the reasons why Sabalenka is the world number one is she has so many tools in her toolkit, and we know that she's a baseline ball striker. Like she's super good from the baseline, but she's also able to sort of incorporate new tools in her tennis shots, like more variety. So I think that's one of the reasons why she's the world number one. Like, for example, in this match, she used a lot of drop shots. And yeah, also the tiebreak record with Sabalenka is just crazy. I think especially against a player like Mboko who really haven't played as many matches, when they know about a tiebreak record like that Sabalenka has, it definitely will be getting into their head. It's really impossible to be like, okay, she's won like what 20 tiebreaks in a row, and I'm just like, I feel like that's definitely something that you will be thinking about when you're playing. And however, I do think this shows Mboko's potential, and now Mboko is actually ranked higher than Andreeva, so sort of time back to the previous match, Andreeva is definitely feeling the pressure of other similar aged player as her. So yeah. Okay, and then I want to talk about Elena Svitolina against Iga Swiatek. So Svitolina won with a score of 6-2, 4-6, and 6-4. So Svitolina is actually playing, she's actually one of the top, I think, players this season. She only lost 4 matches, which will be including the one she lost to Rybakina following this match. So she played Rybakina in a semifinal and she lost that. But yeah, like Svitolina has just been really winning so many matches. I think her and Rybakina are tied with the numbers of matches they won this year. She's playing so well, and I don't know, like after her maternity leave, I think her form just only seems to be improving throughout each season. Like obviously there's up and downs in each season, but she's just been getting better and better, which is super surprising to me because prior to her maternity leave, she's more of like a counter puncher. You can think more, I don't know, Caroline Wozniacki sort of type of player, but now she's just like overwhelming her players with power. And Iga is known to be like a really like baseline ball striker, but Svitolina was still able to win this. And I think definitely part of it has to do with Iga's locker room, sort of, for lack of better words here, aura. I think because she had that ridiculous winning streak in, I think it was 2022, 2021, everyone was just, also because it's in 1,000 tournament, everyone just knows that Iga will come out dominating these. But I think over the past few weeks and even the past few years, like she just hasn't been able to win these matches. Like she's consistently going really far and deep into these tournaments, but she's just always like unable to win like a semifinal or a quarterfinal to go into the finals and get that title. So yeah, and I think I'm really kind of worried about Iga because I don't think her partnership with Wim Fissette is working. I mean, just Wim Fissette's goal, I think, is for Iga to incorporate more tools in her toolbox, sort of like the thing I talked about with Sabalenka before. But I think Iga always will just resort to ball bashing because that's what she's more like the most comfortable with. And when it's a match that's sort of like this, that's in its, when she feels like she's going to lose, she's just going to go back to straight up striking and hitting the living daylight out of the ball. So yeah, and with this, with her loss, Rybakina will become the new world number 2, which does make sense because Rybakina, I feel like, had a better end of last season and obviously a better start of this season compared to Iga. So yeah, okay. And then the final will be between, it's a rematch, and it will be between Sabalenka and Rybakina. I think Sabalenka will win this, but you guys will definitely know after, so like by the time you guys are listening to this, but my prediction goes to Sabalenka. We'll take a little break and we'll come back with the follow through. To be honest, for the follow through, there isn't that much to talk about, but I think I want to talk about just my quick finals predictions. So as I said, I think Sabalenka is going to win the women's final. And for the men's, between Jannik Sinner and Daniil Medvedev, I think Sinner is still going to win. I don't want to necessarily underestimate Medvedev, but I think just because Sinner has less tennis in his legs, even though Medvedev, I feel like, is in better form, but okay, honestly, I hope Medvedev wins, but I think Sinner is going to take this. I mean, it might be a really close 3-set match. I think it will be close regardless, but I think Sinner will win in 3, and I think Sabalenka will win in 2, but they've never really played like a straightforward straight 2-set matches between Sabalenka and Rybakina. So maybe Sabalenka in 3 and Sinner in 3. So yeah, that's my predictions. So next week we will be talking about the Miami Open, which happens on March 19th. So sort of just to go back to the toss, the tennis tour really is never ending, and that's why I feel like it's important to shorten the tennis season. So yeah, but we'll talk about Miami next week. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe wherever you're listening. rate my show. It really helps a lot. Comment or just DM ideas for whatever you guys want me to talk about regarding tennis. But yeah, that's all for today, and I'll see you guys next week. Let the serves continue. Bye.